members that the meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube pages as normal. Thank you. Firstly, do we have any apologies for absence?
We've received apologies from Councillors Clark, Cadwell, and Butler. Thank you.
Councillor Jennings running late. Okay, thank you. Okay, item 1, minutes of the previous meeting. Are you all in agreement that I sign the minutes of the previous meeting, which is dated the 17th of July 2023? I'll see those in favour of signing. Thank you. Thank you. Item 2, members' interests. Do members have any interests to declare this evening? No interests? Thank you. Item 3, the annual complaints report. I'd like to invite Louise Sabui, who's the business change manager, to present the report. Thank you, Louise.
The annual complaints report provides data relating to stage 1 and stage 2 complaints received by the council. Can you hear me now? Is that better? So it provides data relating to stage 1 and stage 2 complaints received by the council between April 2022 and March 2023. The report provides information on broad themes, actions taken, service improvements that have taken place as a result. It also provides members with information on complaints referred to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman during the same time period. If I may, I'd like to briefly take you through the highlights and then take questions at the end. So we've seen a reduction in the number of stage 1 complaints, 175 compared to 233 last year. And section 3.1 of the report provides a summary of complaints received by each service area, as well as an indicator of the higher volume customer interactions and transactions for those services. So that provides a balance. We've seen a reduction in number of stage 2 complaints, 21 compared to 33 last year. And in terms of percentage of complaints resolved on time, we've met our target for stage 1 complaints. 93% were resolved within time against a target of 90%, and 87% of stage 2 complaints were resolved within time, and that's the same target of 90%. You'll find a summary of all the complaint themes and service improvements by each service area in Appendix 3 and 4. We have seen a reduction in the number of complaints going to the LGO, the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, 12 this year compared to 15 the year before. But this year there were 3 detailed investigations and all 3 were upheld. And the report provides a summary of these 3 cases. We continue to see a reduction in the number of non-HDC complaints. And finally, it's always helpful to see compliments, and particularly when we're reporting on complaints, it provides a really nice balance. And I'd say the data on compliments is probably not a true reflection of all the compliments that the council and our officers receive. So we continue to encourage our officers to record them where we can on our compliments tracker. That brings me to the end. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Louise. On this item, committee is requested to comment on the data relating to the formal stage 1 and stage 2 complaints received 2022-23, and to comment on the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Local Authority Report for Huntingdonshire District Council for 2022-23. So do you have any questions, comments for Louise? Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Let me one. Sorry. Thank you. Just notice that although the overall numbers are trending down, there seems to be a significant increase in the number of complaints arising in the development and growth area. And this is not trending down. And they're becoming a larger proportion of the total amount of complaints. Is there any background as to why that's happening in that particular area compared to other areas which have clearly seen consistent decline in recent years?
You're talking about planning? Yeah, yeah, okay. So last year there were 58 complaints for planning, and this year there's been 37 complaints for planning. Yeah, okay.
Councillor Gray.
Okay, so perhaps I can build on that theme then, because you're right, there are fewer complaints in that area, but I mean, one of the some for a start, some looks to be ongoing at this point in time, but of course, 3 of these made it through to the LGO, and we did not kind of come out of that looking, you know, that's an increase. If you think about, unless I'm mistaken, that's an escalation of the complaints process. So one could argue that we're in, you know, as far as that particular part of the authority is concerned, we're in a worse position than we were before. And if you look at the preceding year, where we had 5 investigations at the LGO, of course, 2 of them were related to COVID. So that's kind of really that there were, you know, we haven't really improved in a year. And I suppose I'm looking around the table at the officer kind of core to say, what confidence have we got? Because around the improvement in the planning department, because this is a consistent, you know, what's coming out of here doesn't look good. And most of us go to parish councils, and most of us know that this is an area of great concern to our parish council colleagues in the tier below us, who are expressing, I think, deep frustration with our performance with regards to planning. So, are we learning lessons from this? Is the question that I suppose I'm posing.
Yeah, I agree. It's new. An award of cost is new for us, and it is disappointing. And I think the report does look at what lessons have been learned, and you know we just need to make sure that it doesn't happen again. The complaints that did escalate to the LGO and were upheld did relate to a period of time. That I think there have been changes since then. There's been an improvement program. So I think it's just keep a watching brief.
Councillor Sanderson.
I think probably the best way to answer that question is to say we've got a paper going to scrutiny I think it's already been published actually. It's going to scrutiny next week, performance and growth on the planning service. And there's a lot more detail in there. And of course, I'll be in attendance, as will Clara and others, and we can discuss that in more detail. Happy to do that.
Thank you. Obviously, we know the recent history of the planning service, and you know, there have been problems over the last year. I think it's fair to say we are hopefully on a more positive trend now, but obviously this report will refer back to the experience of the previous year, and so you know, we are going to see these issues. Councillor Gray, do you want to come back on that?
I couldn't quite hear the conclusion that you were reaching there, Chair.
I'm referring to the fact that the changes to the planning system, which have been introduced relatively recently, will hopefully mitigate the issues that we've noted here, which we have to acknowledge did exist in the previous year.
Okay, my reflection on that would be, I think that's something that we need to keep a watching brief on, because we have been talking about improvements to the planning service for some time, and yet what we're seeing is that during the municipal year 22-23, it's got worse at a time when we were saying it was going to get better. So I think we just need to keep, I think, as a committee, a very close eye on that, because we're all about the integrity of the authority, and this is the sharp end of complaints here.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I think anybody would disagree with that. Thank you. Any further comments, questions on this report? Okay, if not, so we have noted the recommendation, and we will then move on to the next item, which is item 4, the risk management strategy. And cometh the hour, cometh the lady. Yes, the item 4 was actually circulated at a later date, and Karen will now present the report. Thank you, Karen.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair. So we're bringing tonight the risk management strategy. This is an update of the previous policy, and it underpins Huntingdon District Council's governance and assurance processes and policies. It links very well into the LGA peer review that we had last year, and the review work and subsequent actions from that. And the risk management strategy should inform our governance, it should inform our internal audit plan, and focus our activities and actions thinking into SITFA's governance guidance, and in particular their untapped potential report, which again was the basis of the LGA peer review last year. It has particular focus on how we address risks, how we record them, and the definition of our risk appetite and what is and isn't tolerable, and what the actions for escalation within the organisation are. And our risk appetite now is quite clearly linked to our 5x5 risk matrix, so everything is scored and it's very clear whether that is a tolerable risk or intolerable risk. For the first time, we've also brought the combined risk register, which details all the risks across the organisation, not just the corporate ones, but all the service ones as well. So it is quite a weighty document, and there are some duplication risks in there. We're not presenting it as a full and final document. This is an ongoing document which will be part of our living governance going forward. So we will be scrutinising it, we will be reviewing it, and we will be bringing updates to you. The underlying thing with risk management is it's not something you look at once a year. It's something you look at constantly. Whenever you agree a new paper, you initiate a new idea, there's new legislation coming in, risk management underpins that. So the risk register is something which will never be a finalised article. It will always be something that we are going through, and technical term, fettling. So open to questions on it, if anyone has any.
Thank you, Karen. So do members have questions either on the strategy document itself, or indeed on the risk register, the integrated risk register that you now have? Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, the reason I was delaying there is I'm struggling to work out how many risks we actually have on the risk register. And then I question, therefore, whether these are strategic risks or just basically a compilation of risks. The actual policy document, I don't have any difficulties with, but what I would like to see for future reports to this committee is the risk profile, the table in a matrix showing what the risks are, so that we can focus more quickly and easily on the high risks, rather than having to plow through 20 pages to see what's still red and what's orange and yellow. And on that question, Can I ask when the list of risks in the risk register were last reviewed, and how often they are reviewed, and what criteria are applied to remove risks once they're no longer a strategic risk, and what the process is for adding new risks to the risk register? Because in the format it's presented here, I don't find it terribly helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, I accept your commentary on it's difficult to read the risk register at the moment, and certainly we can add a summary table. The risk register risks are added by service managers as and when they arise. So there's no set timetable for adding new risks. So essentially, whenever a risk is identified, we'll be, if having a conversation on something new coming through and we identify then there's a risk, the service manager is actioned with going away and putting it on the risk register. As far as removing risks go, then that will be the role of assurance board. So verifying that the mitigating action that's been put in place has been carried out and either the risk no longer exists or it's sufficiently mitigated and that mitigation is permanent and embedded, that is no longer a risk. I think I've answered all your questions. So.
Thank you, Karen. Is that? Yeah, I think she can say we're acknowledging the lack of readability of the register as it stands, and certainly it would be helpful to have something more easier to consume. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. Karen, thank you for the report. I'd probably follow up just a comment and then a couple of questions, if I may. So a lot of what Councillor Hodgson-Jones has asked, I was going to ask, so I won't repeat that. My reflections of this, and I'd be interested in yours, given that you're relatively new to the authority, and we obviously have our new chief executive with us here this evening, is that this looks quite traditional, I suppose, as a risk monitoring report, and I think risk governance and risk monitoring has moved on probably beyond this. So I wondered whether or not you have any plans to, I know you have many things on your plate, but any plans to revitalise and refresh this, perhaps in line with more sort of modern approaches to risk management. And then a couple of supplementary questions, if I may.
So certainly, yes, we are reviewing the risks on it. Essentially, at the moment, the initial work that's ongoing is to look at what creates a risk, what's the cause, and what's the event. And I think once we start doing that work, a lot of the risks on here will actually be merged because they are very similar risks. It's just maybe the input or the output is slightly different. So if we move those to being more, I don't want to say generic, that's not the right term for it, but no, remove the duplication. That will give us greater visibility on what's happening on the risks. And certainly when we start looking at what the severity and the likelihood of the risks are, that will allow us to then gauge them more correctly and make sure that the mitigation that's going in is appropriate. And it will allow us certainly to focus on what those major risks and what are the key risks which are likely to undermine the authority are. And certainly when we're then looking at the severity, that will help mitigate those. But yeah, work is ongoing on this. And as I said, we will be bringing this back on a regular basis to CGC.
Excuse me, I myself would certainly be interested in you bringing back some thoughts as to how you might sort of refresh this in terms of both presentation and, as I said, ease of looking at it. My second question, if I may, Chair, really relates around the assurance board that exists. So I'm curious as to how often does the assurance board meet? Who is on the assurance board? And have there been any actions that have kind of come out of the assurance board that can give me assurance as a councillor that the assurance board is doing what the assurance board ought to be doing. Lots of assurance there.
So the assurance board is scheduled to meet on a monthly basis. It includes the main governance overseers, I would call us. So I'm the chair. Deborah is on the assurance board, as is Lisa. My chief finance officer sat across there is, and also the risk and management officer. Sorry, risk and strategy officer is on the board as well, and then we will call in subject matter experts as required. A lot of the work to date has been focusing on the risk strategy and developing risk management. We are starting now to bring through where new processes are being introduced. They will come through assurance board to make sure that it's giving us the guidance and the control for implementing them. So, for example, distributing grants, just making sure that we've got the correct governance and collection processes in place for making sure the money's going to the right people, and it's a good, it's the appropriate level of governance on it, so it's not overly bureaucratic and it's not stopping the people who deserve those grants being able to access them.
Might I just have one supplementary question? I do appreciate the committee's indulgence. I'm curious, so that thank you for the answers there. When I read through there's an awful lot of material there, and there's an awful lot of checks that you know are in place to deal with and mitigate risks. And I suppose I'm curious as to, have you come across instances where what is laid down here is not actually happening? So we're recording this, but where is the verification process that actually that is taking place and those processes are robust and they're in train? Can you see what I'm driving at there? Because it looks great, but unless we're verifying that that is taking place, obviously there's another part of the process, isn't there?
So again, I'll take you back to the peer review we had last year and the CIPFA guidance on governance and untapped potential, where they propose and they recommend that our internal audit programme is driven by the risk register. And that is what we are now moving towards. And that's, so as I said, the risk register and the risk strategy underpins our internal governance. So our internal audit work should be control-based and not process-based. And so that should be looking at what people are telling us they are doing to protect the organisation and verifying that that is happening.
If I may just quickly respond to that as well.
Yeah,
So
please go
yeah,
ahead.
absolutely. The plan is risk based. So I think if you remember when we brought the plan earlier this year, the very high and high risks, we've used the inherent risks because we're not necessarily confident that the controls, the mitigating factors listed in there make the residual risk score reliable. So you're quite right. We need to take that looking at those controls that are listed there, and that forms part of our audit. So if the controls are in there, we will look at them as part of the audit, in addition to all the other things that we would look at. Yeah. And just going back to your previous question about taking information to the assurance board, Karen didn't mention, but we're changing the risk management software. It's going to be upgraded, and it will be a lot more interactive. So we'll have a dashboard on it that we can set up to our own configuration to produce, and certainly things like committee might ask for, we could set it up to be something like that you might want. And I also see that those sort of exception reports on how often things have been looked at, the assurance history can be delved into and maybe run an exception report on action on risks that haven't been reassessed in the last whatever we determine in the strategy, whether that's 6 months or 5 years. You know, we can run those, and I see that those reports are something that the assurance board can pick up and manage the risks. So
Thank you, Deborah. That really sounds like good news. We look forward to seeing that. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Karen. My question really is about you've identified a lot of different users of the risk register, which is, and some are more sophisticated in their understanding of these type of things than others. Is there any mechanism that you currently have when risks move from, say, amber to red or red to amber, uh, of informing the users of the risk register that these risks have changed? Um, and if there isn't, is there a way perhaps of building that into your report as you look at the format of it?
So the answer to that is yes, and we've already started using that tool to inform predominantly SLT members to look at where risks have been changed since the last report was run and what they've changed to and from. But yes, we need to know. As Deborah mentioned, the software is being updated. I haven't seen the full functionality of the new software coming through, but certainly the existing software, we can run those exception reports and verify where changes have happened and what the impact of those are. We're also running, we plan to run additional training sessions to educate our users of the risk register. As you commented, some of them are more able at describing a risk than others, and we're trying to get some very simple rules down as to how to articulate what the risk is and what the impacts and the effect are.
Thank you, Karen. Any further questions on this side? Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that there are 110 risks on this register, and I don't think that is a manageable number for any risk manager to be managing. So there needs to be some whittling down of these. But the other thing that I think needs to be incorporated in here is to having some consistency in standards as to how you assess the appropriate inherent risk, the likelihood ratings, because some of these seem to have very high likelihood ratings, and yet when you look at what they are, they shouldn't be a high likelihood. And there seems to be a disconnect between the assessment of the likelihood and the assessment of the impact. And I'd like to see something standardizing how you set the rating for likelihood and how you set the rating for impact, so that you can get some consistency, which would give us as an organization a much clearer idea of where the real risks are in terms of the high risk items.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. We will endeavour to do that, and it may well be that we'll in future we'll report risks where actually where they are completely green, we won't be. We'll identify that there are X number of risks which are too low to put on the register, but if they are fully mitigated, then they don't necessarily want our attention as much.
Thank you, Karen. That's helpful. Yeah. Any further questions on this item? Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm too a little bit disappointed with the presentation of the report. It actually stands out to me as let's have a Google Doc and you all add your own. It doesn't seem, understand possibly that obviously there's various contributors here, but there doesn't seem to be one person who's monitoring this well and standardizing it so it's in a good read format. I'm looking, for example, at the one leisure on page 26. So we get a very small blue line on the end of the page, and then we list down on future pages the risks that we believe may occur or where we may be at risk with one leisure. And they're all over the place. We've got a drowning, and then we've got chemicals, but they're not actually grouped together. And this is, this is a document that should be, that should be top class, should be, it should be something that we sort of can, offer publicly, and it should, and I'd like to see it more of an easy read. At the moment, I think there was probably too much detail on there, that we should be outlining the risk, then what the implications could be to the council as a further column in there. So I'd like to see that. And I just want to pick up finally on one comment that refers to training completed in 2017, which I think is inherently out of date. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments on that? Those points. Thank you, Karen.
So, absolutely, Councillor Blackwell, I do agree that there is some inconsistencies in the definition of the risks, and I think in some instances it demonstrates the passion of our service managers and their wish to do a good job. So yes, we do need to standardise their responses on it. The other thing I will say is that the first part of any successful risk register is actually capturing the risks in the first place, and then tempering them down to be a more consistent basis. So I have to argue back that I'd much rather people put the risks in here, and then we have the conversation with them as to whether they are relevant or actually whether they're a subset of another risk, or whether it'd be better worded if we were to move to the cause, effect, and what the initial event that create those is. But that is the ongoing work that we're now doing.
Thank you, Karen. Any further questions on this item? Do we have? Okay. In terms of the process here, there's a slight change to the original process. So, because this committee cannot approve the risk management strategy on its own, we are recommended to basically take it to cabinet and to council. So, as it requires approval from cabinet and from council, with the consent of this meeting, I propose that we amend the recommendations to note the strategy and refer the matter to cabinet for consideration. Do I have a seconder for that proposal, please? Thank you, Councillor Hodgson-Jones. Could I see a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you. I think it's unanimous. Yeah. Thank you, committee. Moving on then to the next item, item 5, polling districts and polling places review. Lisa Tlonska, Democratic Services and Elections Manager, would you please present this report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the purpose of the report was to advise you as members of the statutory review of polling districts and polling places in the district. So the last one was undertaken in 2019, and we're now due to undertake a further review of polling districts and polling places. So the purpose of the report provides a summary of the process involved, the indicative timetable, and proposed arrangements, and sort of at the moment proposed amendments to existing arrangements. So just taking you through the report, there is a requirement for us to undertake this review and complete it by the 31st of January 2025. And the reason why we're bringing this earlier and why we're starting this earlier is really down to, in paragraph 2.2, I'm just drawing your attention to the implications of the repeal of the Fixed Terms Parliaments Act. So at the moment, we don't know when the next parliamentary election is scheduled. We know it's going to be held by January 2025, unless anybody's got any inside information around the table. But as it stands at the moment, we know there's going to be one held in the next 15 months. So we need to make sure that obviously the new parliamentary boundaries that have been published for the parliamentary constituencies within the district, we want to make sure that the polling districts are appropriate and accurate for the purposes of running a parliamentary election on those new boundaries. It's pretty much at this stage, this is just the first report that you'll see coming through the cycle of meetings. And say the report itself just provides a detailed, just again, summary of the definitions of a polling district, polling place, and polling stations. And as members will probably be familiar, we do undertake a review of polling stations on a regular basis, making sure that they are still appropriate and fit for purpose. In addition to that, the Elections Act that came in last year has placed another duty on us, well, it's placed many duties on us, but one of them in particular is about the accessibility of polling stations, which in all instances, even before this act came in, we wanted to make sure that obviously it was accessible to all electors. And similarly, we've started a review of all our polling stations. By all means, it's not complete, but certainly I know that pretty much all of our polling stations will be accessible. But again, we're aware of there's some issues that we know. We've got scheduled elections next year for Police and Crime Commission on the 2nd of May. So as it stands at the moment, we know that there are some polling stations that aren't available. So again, that's work in progress to find alternative venues as well. So Appendix A just provides a summary schedule of the existing polling districts and polling places, and obviously details of the polling stations that we currently use. Appendix D is just a summary of the accessibility, a questionnaire that we circulated to all our polling stations as it stands at the moment, making sure that obviously it's level access, disabled, if there's disabled parking, etc. And then Appendix C just provides the detail of the notice that will be published on the 2nd of October when we go out to consultation on the review. So just drawing your attention as it stands at the moment to the proposed changes in terms of the polling districts, really primarily as a result of the changes to the parliamentary constituencies with the merging of a couple of polling districts in Stow Longer and St Ives North. The other ones are just suggestions as well in terms of just because of the nature of the increase in housing electorate in certainly St Neots East, Godmanchester, and again Brampton. We created. We've always used for over the last couple of years Lady Olivia Centre in Brampton, and so we just want to formalise that in terms of formalising it as a permanent polling district as well. And again, just the report itself sets out the timetable. The intention will be after the consultation, I will bring back the responses to the consultation to your next meeting with a view to council making the final approval of the new schedule of existing polling districts and polling places. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Do councillors have any questions on this agenda item? Councillor Howell.
Okay, mine is actually just a quick comment. Just under Appendix A for Yaxley, the polling places, it needs an amendment on it because they both say the same thing. They both say to the right of Middleton's Road. I think one should say to the left.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Chair. Yeah, thank you. It should, yeah, yes, yeah, you're right. Apologies, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Jennings.
A very minor point, Chair. I was just interested, as some of them refer to north and south and some to left and right. In my ward, I have a road that's directly north-south, but it's called left and right either side, and it depends which way you're driving up it.
Fair point for you, Chair. To accompany the notice, there will be the full detail of all of the maps that you should be able to see the detail of the roads as well, whether it's left or right. So yeah, fair point. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for putting that. That's yeah, worth correcting. Certainly, absolutely. Yeah, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thank you. It's just a note really that we are going to be looking at, hopefully, that in particular on the polling stations details for the Alconbury Western one in particular, that there is no access ramp, there is no flat access for disabled users, and I just need to seek assurance that we are going to be looking at that.
Yeah, through you, Chair, we've got additional burdens to assist us in terms of the provisions under the Elections Act for accessibility, so that for the likes of purchasing additional ramps, whether it's permanent or temporary. So yeah, we've got the ability to do that, and I think the only issue I would say in a lot of these areas, obviously we've got a predominantly rural district, and a lot of our parishes are limited in terms of having one village hall, if that. As you know, some of our areas we use houses, we use garages, we use So I think through you, Chair, you're the eyes and the ears in terms of members on the ground and also the consultation will go out to town and parish councils as well in terms of getting some further feedback. But I can reassure you that absolutely we will comply with the requirements under the Act. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very minor but irritating point. The polling district codes, don't seem to have any rational basis. I know they're listed here in alphabetical order, but even then they don't all follow alphabetical order. It would actually facilitate people's understanding as to which polling district they're in if they could actually identify the polling district code with where they actually live in a more easily accessible way. Is this a historic legacy thing that they've grown up this way, and perhaps it could be looked at?
Through you, Chair, it is historical. Yes, I inherited it. There's, I have to say, there's no necessarily logic to it. A lot of authorities will present that in a similar way. For the benefit of the electorate, though, I mean, obviously on a poll card, the polling district is largely irrelevant, because on a poll card it will obviously provide details of the polling station they're required to go and vote in. But I will certainly take that away and look at it, but I can't guarantee that it's going to change. So.
Thank you, Lisa. Any further comments on this item? No. In which case, so we've noted the process involved in the review of the polling districts and polling places 2023, and we've reviewed the consultation document. We are, in this committee, authorising the commencement of the polling districts and polling places review in accordance with the consultation document attached and the timetable for consultation. So I assume councillors are happy with that. Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 6, which is the annual report on Huntingdon District Council's compliance with the Information Rights Act and information governance. I don't think we have Adam with us, who's speaking on that one. Oh, he's up there. Sorry. Hi, Adam.
Hello.
Adam,
Thank
over
you,
to
Chair.
you.
Thank you. Here digitally. So thank you. This is a report. It provides
It's
detail.
going to be a little bit
council-
faint. We're just going to try and adjust your volume.
What it is. There we go. It always helps if I bring the armbar down. Sorry about that. So this report provides a bit of detail on the council's general compliance with both Freedom of Information Act, environmental information regulations, as well as the frameworks provided by General Data Protection Regulations and Data Protection Act. I'm just going to do a quick highlight of points of importance, and then happy to answer questions at the end. So we've had some structural changes in the last year, which touched upon earlier on in the report. There's a new data protection officer, a new dedicated request manager role. We've moved across to a joint information and security board and retired the old information security group. So the regularity is exactly the same. It meets every quarter, but as 3C a shared service, all councils meet on that quarterly basis. And there's a new dedicated information and cybersecurity role. General performance, so update from last year in that the National Cybersecurity Centre 10 steps to cybersecurity are now all being fully met following last year's submission. That's touched upon in section 5.3. Subject access request reviews and ICO subject access request complaints are at 100% response, which is very positive. But as a detractor for that, unfortunately, only 57% of access requests are responded to in the regulatory timeframe, which will require a bit of work this year to bring that figure up. There was one Information Rights Tribunal judgment received by the Council relating to a historical request made in May 2020. But as this has worked through the system, that judgment came through in this municipal year. So it's been reported in this report. A response to this was provided though. So incidents reported has increased, but overall, these were of a lower severity of the previous year because we haven't had to report any to the Information Commissioner's Office. You will note there was a significant jump from 2020 to 2021. Our understanding is that is primarily because of the lower processing during the pandemic, which has caused those incidents to jump up in the past 2 years. There is an increase in freedom of information requests and environmental information regulation requests. Still not at pre-pandemic levels, but there's a significant amount. But overall, the council is responding to approximately 75% of requests, able to provide some level of information to the public, which provides a good level of accountability and transparency. All bar one internal reviews and all bar one ICO responses were also completed in time in relation to these. Coming up as well to improve compliance, we've got 2 systems going live within the next month. So hopefully that's something to report back positively within the next year.
Thank you, Adam, for that report. Councillors, do you have any questions for Adam on this agenda item? No. Councillor Gray.
Just wanted to give my colleagues a chance to go in front of me. Adam, thank you for that. 2 questions from me. Firstly, you refer in 7.3 to working from home and how that changed things, particularly during the pandemic. But obviously, we're not yet back. Well, we're not back to where we were pre-pandemic, and working patterns have changed quite substantially. So whilst I look and see that there was only 1 incident of data being not disposed correctly, I'd love to believe that that was true, but I fear that that may not be true, given that lots of people are still working from home and have a lot of data sitting on bits of paper and obviously their own laptops. So I wonder if you could just give us a flavour of how you and the wider management team are, reinforcing the importance of data security, proper disposal of documentation, people not just sticking stuff in their recycling bins because they've kind of run out of options. Because obviously we don't, here in this building, we've got secure disposal. At home, people don't have that. So if you could give me some flavour of that and how you're
Yes.
sort of addressing that, that would be great. Can I just lodge a second question with you, and then which is on 8.6 around the scoring. Obviously, good to see that we've gone from 81% to 83%. We have a target of 90%. One of the things I like to see with those kind of targets is how many cumulative days we missed our targets by, because that gives us a sense of, are we missing by a fraction of days, or are we missing by weeks? And what does that look like over time? So obviously you can't provide that this evening, but I wondered if that was something that could potentially be incorporated into future reports, so it gives us some idea of the cumulative miss that we've got going on there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Councillor.
certainly.
Adam, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. On the cumulative days point, I do think that's a really good indicator. I completely agree. So we'll resolve to include that in future reports. On the question around 7.3, it isn't necessarily originally the working from home that caused the decrease. It was the fact in that initial response to the pandemic, a lot of processes were being changed around, which resulted in a decreased processing of data, which means less emails being sent, less letters being sent, which caused that decrease. But to touch upon your question of how we are managing paper and making sure that those bits of information aren't retained at home, we do work largely on a digital system. So primarily the processing of data occurs on your work laptop. There's limited reason to record data at home. Where that does occur, you can bring it into the office and secure that. We're reinforcing that through training sessions. So we're trying to combine those technical and those organizational methods of securing data and making sure individuals within the organization are aware of those. And also just making the team a little bit more accessible to ask those questions. And how should I be processing this? Should I be using data at home in this way, or should I use a system to do that? Trying to increase and give that agency to employees to make the right decisions.
Thank you, Adam. With that response. And are there any further questions for Adam on this agenda item? No. If not, then we have noted the contents of this report, and thank you, Adam, for your contribution. And we'll move on to item 7, which is the unaudited statements of account 2022-23. And this is for Karen to present this item. Thank you, Karen.
Good evening again. So We're bringing the draft accounts for 22-23 for your consideration. These are consistent with the outturn report I shared with you at the meeting on the 30th of May. Obviously, then I also said that we should have been publishing the accounts by the 31st of May. That's one of our statutory duties, but we were unable to do that because I didn't have confidence in the opening balances because our audit of the 21-22 accounts was still ongoing and hadn't been finalised. So, subject to the next item on the agenda, I'm pleased to say that the audit is now complete and the draft accounts are updated with the amended opening balances, and I believe they are now in a correct position that they can be published, and we are hoping to do that with effect from tomorrow. So that's what I'm bringing for you, and happy to answer any further questions on them.
Thank you, Karen. So, councillors, do you have questions on this item? Councillor Gray?
Probably not a question, but you will, I hope, indulge me briefly. There's a certain degree of satisfaction at the outturn of that budget, given that that was the very last budget that I had the privilege to present to the council. So to see the outturn that's in there and the contribution that's been made to the reserves in your draft budget that's there is obviously very pleasing.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to pick up on one of my hobby horses, which is the pension deficit. And I noticed that our pension deficit has suddenly moved to a pension surplus. But I was a little bit intrigued by the commentary in the paper itself, which says that the pension scheme has seen a significant movement, and it's due to the impact of the triennial valuation, COVID-19, and the war in Ukraine. Most residents would wonder how the war in Ukraine would impact on our pension deficit or surplus. COVID-19, unless it carried away a lot of our pensioners, shouldn't have made that much impact. And the reality is, I'm trying to understand how much of this is due to the triennial valuation, how much is due to the economic and financial landscape, and is this a function of NPV rates having a much higher discount rate?
I would love to be able to answer that question. Reality is that we use the actuarial valuations from our pension provider, and they give us the information based upon what we should be putting in our accounts for valuation. I can go back and see if we can get further detail on that information.
Thank you. I think that would be appreciated. Yes, thank you. Further questions on this item, councillors? Sorry, Karen. Carry on.
Can I just make one further comment, and that is to publicly thank the efforts of firstly my CFO, who's sat across the other side of the room, and her team, who have done an incredible amount of work over the summer to fulfill all the audit needs on the last set of accounts, but also to ensure this pack of accounts is updated so quickly and available for publication. They truly have delivered 100%, and I'm very proud of them.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Karen. Councillor Townsend.
Sorry, a quick question from me. I mean, how much did the events of about this time last year have on our pension fund? As I seem to recall, the stock market and the pound both took a bit of a beating, and that would have contributed towards that, would it?
I'm trying to remember whether we had a valuation done at this point last year. I would need to go back and come back to you on that one. We've had a few valuations done. I just can't remember at which points they were done. That doesn't necessarily trigger a revaluation of our pension.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Jennings.
A very quick question just on the pensions. Just for my mind, is it likely, therefore, that we're going to see a pension surplus for the next 2 years until the next triennial revaluation? Or is it just impossible to say?
I would have to take professional advice on that one.
Thank you. Any other further questions on the unaudited statement of accounts 22-23? I had a comment of mine on this. I noted that the AGS, the annual governance statement 22-23, under the review of effectiveness, it mentions, I think there's a couple of points where the year needs to be updated. So on the second paragraph, it refers to the year 22-23, which the new financial year it's referring to here is actually the current year 23-24. Also, under the other governance issues section and the table there, that's referring to issues identified in 22-23. I think those are largely carried forward from 21-22 and should probably be reflected in the report as such. So I've asked that we can make those small amendments to the AGS as part of the approval process. Hopefully councillors are okay with that. Councillor Taylor.
So yeah, just one little note. I know we can't predict, so we try and predict council tax returns because we know X amount of houses with those bandings and how much we charge, and there is sections that we can see for those. But is there any chance that we can see things that we don't expect, such as extra houses that are being built, or for instance, that there's certain houses that are left empty and they attract extra council tax, such as if they're left open for 5 years, they get an extra 100% of their council tax added to it. Is there any chance that we could see that somewhere in the budget? So we can see how many houses there are actually left fallow in the district and how much revenue we collect from those.
That's not information we maintain in the finance system, but I can certainly talk to the revenues team to see if that information is available from them.
Thank you, Councillor. If there are no further questions, I'm not seeing any further questions. Again, on this agenda item, we need to modify the process slightly because this agenda item needs to go to the executive leader and chief executive for approval. So, as the statement of accounts does require signing, I'm proposing that we amend recommendation A. Which is that the annual governance statement be approved and that the executive leader and chief executive be authorised to sign on behalf of the council. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Harvey or Councillor Blackwell? Yeah, thank you both. Councillor Blackwell. So, Councillor Swanson. I'm coming to that. Thank you. Bear with. Yes, we need to move to a vote. So to clarify, the Corporate Governance Committee is invited to the annual governance statement, Annex A, be approved and the executive leader and chief executive be authorised to sign this statement on behalf of the council, and B, that the unaudited statement of accounts 22-23 Annex B be approved, and C, that the notice of publication Annex C be approved. So can I see a show of hands for those, please? That's unanimous again. Thank you, councillors. So moving on then to agenda item 8, approval for the publication of the audited statement of accounts for 2021-22. Members who have received the appendix to follow for this item. Karen, we have your item on the agenda. Could you present this report to members? Thank you.
Yeah, as I just referred to, we are very pleased to have hopefully reached the end of our 2021-22 audit, and I'm going to introduce you to our representatives from EY, Mark Hodgson and Andrew Paler, who led the audit for us and will present their audit report.
Thank you. Good evening. So, yeah, Mark Hodgson, audit partner. So the audit results report before you this evening bridges the gap from what we presented to you in the April meeting and the position now. Within the April report, we noted 5 areas of work that we needed to conclude in order to be able to get to being able to issue the audit opinion. Those 5 areas being around national domestic rate appeals, payroll system implementation, property, plant and equipment valuations, investment property valuations, journal testing, and value for money procedures. All of those areas are now concluded, and this report narrates the finding from each of those 5 areas by way of an update section where relevant in the report. The rest of the report remains as it did in April, as nothing has changed. In summary, against those 5 areas and the findings, so national non-domestic rate appeals on our page 22, no issues were identified. The same being true for payroll implementation on page 23, no issues were identified. And then the same applies to our journal testing procedures covering fraud and management override controls on pages 15 and 16, no issues were identified. In terms of value for money procedures on page 35, we didn't identify any risk of significant weakness through our work, and therefore we would have no matters to report by exception within our audit opinion, and we will have a commentary against those arrangements in our auditor's annual report, which will follow once we've issued our audit opinion. In relation, though, to property, plant and equipment valuations and investment property valuations, we did report at your April meeting that there were issues with the fixed asset register the council had in place in respect of that financial year, and the fact you were moving to a new fixed asset register going forward. There were significant issues with the legacy fixed asset register, impacting historic valuation movements when a revised current valuation was received, and therefore highlighted during this audit. I would say that this is an incredibly complicated and complex area of accounting and is clearly data-driven by the data held within a fixed asset register and the purity of it. So getting to the correct position for the 31st of March 22 balance sheet position was critical, so you could have a clean opening position for the new fixed asset register going forward. And that has taken a significant amount of time to do and has now complete. And as Karen said, required quite a lot of work on Sharon's behalf to update both our team with assurances and indeed the revised set of financial statements, which then clearly flow into opening balances for your last agenda item and your 22-23 set of accounts. So the details on page 18 and 19 of our report, and they have led to a significant number of audit adjustments as a result of those procedures, which are within the revised accounts Annex C to this agenda item. So it did impact investment properties and the valuations thereof by £551,000. It did impact assets held for sale and their classification actually to other land and buildings because they didn't meet the criteria for assets held for sale, to 1.9 million. We touched on the multi-storey car park in Huntingdon in the April meeting and the valuation of that. There were differences there of 360,000 and 2.4 million. The leisure centres and the ownership by the council moved from 50% to 100% based on information that we had during audit procedures, which increased the valuation by 2.17 million. and had a net impact on a prior year adjustment of 2.2 million. But the most significant areas, the impact on the revaluation gains and losses and the way all of the movements flow through the revaluation reserve and the capital adjustment account, because they are cumulative over the years that they build up. So there was a 2.3 million adjustment to the revaluation reserve and a 2.2 million adjustment to capital adjustment account, with a resultant prior adjustment as well of 2.6 million and 4.8 million respectively to the revaluation reserve and the capital adjustment account. We've also referenced infrastructure assets in our report and the resolution of a national issue, which I touched on in April, but there are no issues coming out of the accounting for that here, and the disclosure note is updated appropriately. We do mention in our report the triennial report on pensions and the impact of that, because the triennial report was issued in March this year, but it is impacting the 31st of March 22 position. As a result of the assumptions used for the triennial review, it did increase the council's liability by 0.8 million from the draft financial statements, but that then decreased because of changes in assets at the pension funds. There's a net decrease in the pension liability of 0.2 million when you flowed both through, which is reflected in the revised financial statements before you tonight. So having been through all of the procedures against those 5 areas we had outstanding, we are in a position to issue an unqualified audit opinion, again the wording of which is in section 3, and that is planned for tomorrow morning. Once you've done your due process, everything's been signed and over to us in the morning. Happily take questions.
Thank you. So do we have any questions for Karen or Ernst Young representatives? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question for Mark, if I may, please. I'm concerned, given the national audit picture and the delay in the 21-22 completion, that the timetable for 22-23 won't be met. Can I ask the probability of EY being able to comply with the required timeframes for 22-23, please?
You can, indeed. And the answer is not only for EY, but for all audit suppliers, because the deadline is 3 days away and hardly any audits have started for 22-23 financial statements.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillors? Councillor Howell.
Yeah, is there anything that we could do to help reduce the resources that you require from this end?
I've had many of these conversations and you're the first person to offer assistance, so thank you. Unfortunately, the position is nationally that the whole public sector audit market is broken and has been reported as being broken by a number of commentators and reported through Public Accounts Committee centrally. And there is a significant piece of work underway emanating from Minister Lee Rowley's letter on the 18th of July to try and fix it. Clearly, and that letter has had 2 key priorities. One, to maximise assurance that audit provides to you as members and members of the public, but equally to reset the audit market so we can start again and don't have the delays going forward. And they're 2 very good aspirations, but are mutually exclusive, given the resources are finite in all audit firms. If the priority is to a reset, then we will be looking to all councils to have draft accounts published on time, supported by robust working papers on day 1 of the audit. Lots of dialogue about when you can do the audit, come in, do the audit, exit, sign. Thank you. So there will be a ramping up of expectation once the reset of the calendar year pertinent to the audit year goes forward. Until the Minister concludes on his deliberations over whether it's maximum assurance or reset, we're sitting a little bit in limbo. Clearly, we have some scenarios in our heads of what might happen, but until he issues that, we can't comment further on which way it will go.
Thank you. Further questions for Mark? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thank you. So if you guys can't, going forward, is there any like if you can't form an opinion for us, is there any alternative way of doing things? Is there an alternative source of we could use to form opinions, or does it slowly rely on you guys?
So external audit is a statutory requirement under the Audit and Accounts Regulations 2015, and the delivery of that is handled by public sector audit appointments, who have appointed a number of firms to provide coverage of audit across the country. And you have to be a registered audit firm and you have to be a key audit partner to be able to sign public sector audits. And that talent pool is limited, which was one of the contributory factors to delays in the first place. So the short answer is no, I think, because you have to have an appointed auditor and you have to have a key audit partner responsible and signing off to maintain audit quality because of the amount of public money that is under stewardship that needs reporting on. So the delays have got us to this place. We need a resolution to get us back on track, and then all audit firms who play in this market then need to deliver to the contract that the PSA has set going forward. So there are levers and there are consequences through reporting and how auditors will have to report going forward. But at the moment, it's whether it's adding value and assurance or it's resetting the market that is fundamental to how this happens going forward.
Just supplementary, off the top of your head, do you know how many firms there are in the country that can provide this service?
Yes, but I have to add it up in my head. 6 or 7, 2 have exited the market for the 23-24 audit year.
Thank you. So Councillor Graham, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify, getting back to this year's the accounts in question here, are we going to deal with Karen's letter of representation next, or is this all bundled up together?
So the process on this agenda item is that we will we've received the report, obviously. We'll be there approving the letter of representation and authorising the Director of Finance and Corporate Resources to sign it. We'll be giving delegated powers to the Chair of the Committee and the Director of Finance and Corporate Resources to authorise and sign the statements on behalf of the Council.
Okay, so one question for Mark and one question for Karen then, if I may. Mark, you mentioned the dreaded fixed asset register. Strikes terror into the hearts of anyone involved in audits. Could I turn you to page 49, which is section 15, which is around investment properties? So these are the notes, the financial statements. Sorry, this is our agenda, not your not your work. Sorry. Well, it's page 49 for me. Page 49 of this report, I think, but it's item 15 and then notes to the statements. So, so I was curious, really, because when I look at this, my interpretation is that the incoming balance in April 2020 was 54 million, that then closed out at 70.7 million last year. That's your incoming balance for this year. And then there's a fairly modest loss of 765,000. But underneath there, of course, we talk about the fact that these investment properties are effectively looked at each year on a sort of fair value basis. So can I just be clear that the conversation that you were having about sort of fixed asset register and it's all very confusing and we needed to get to the bottom of it didn't really relate to these particular investment properties here, because they're almost spot valued on an annual basis. Am I correct in that understanding, that there wasn't sort of a historic problem with valuation there?
Um, 80% correct. The element where the fixed asset register comes in is the split between building or asset and land value, and that was the issue in the fixed asset register. But you're right, it is carried at fair value, so it is a spot point based on however that asset needs to be valued within the market it could be sold within. So yes, 80% value driven, but the fixed asset register did have some land building split issues for two assets.
And then my question for Karen, which may appear sort of a very superficial question, but I think it's important that we at least air it publicly, is you're asking us to approve the letter of representation that you're going to write on our behalf. I don't want to take it as read, but I assume that you are content with the contents of that letter and you're perfectly happy with, because there are some details in there. There are some things in there that we're sort of drawing to EY's attention, but you're content that we should approve that.
I am, yes.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow on from Councillor Harvey's question actually about next year's audit and take the opportunity of while the audit partner was here. Have you already booked time in your diary to do the current year's audit? I guess you're waiting. You're waiting for the government response. Is that?
Partially correct as well, yeah. So we issued a letter in February this year saying, based on the backlog audits that we were dealing with and the necessity to clear those, we wouldn't be commencing any 22-23 audits before the 1st of November. And then the Minister issued his letter in the summer, and now clearly we are waiting on further guidance from the Minister to dictate which direction the two options that I set out earlier would go. So if the priority is maximum assurance, then we'll be having to have dialogue about when dates can be scheduled for all 22-23 audits. But that would necessarily have a consequence on when all audits would be able to catch up, and it doesn't look like that would be before 25-26. So the impact of maximum assurance is an impact on calendar years and going down the line. If the priority for the Minister is on resetting the audit, that we can see a scenario where that would fast forward you to 23-24 audits. And in effect, an audit of 22-23 may not be done, and a disclaimed audit opinion would be issued saying there is a direction to move forward as part of resetting the local public sector audit market. And clearly, quite a big judgment and quite a big decision for the Minister to make, and all audit firms need that guidance to be able to plan effectively for the delivery of audits to whichever year it impacts.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's quite a difficult choice between a reset and maximum assurance. Maximum assurance is the ideal, but clearly is not going to be deliverable, and if was attempted to be delivered for 22-23 would then have knock-on effects for 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and we'd probably still be talking about it in 2030. If the Minister does choose to look at reset, is there a likelihood that some sense may prevail in actually doing a reset based on a risk basis, such that those authorities that are lower risk get reset, and those authorities that are seen as high risk remain on maximum assurance? And if the minister were to go down that road, which bucket do you foresee Huntingdon falling in?
Some very good observations and questions. Thank you. What we do know is that we do have to perform value for money work across all audit years, as opposed to true and fair audit opinion on financial statements, because that is one aspect of providing assurance that any council's arrangements are adequate or not adequate. And that is a key reporting requirement that DLUC would require. So the value for money element of every audit would have to be performed. I think the understanding is the minister's direction would affect every local authority in England, and therefore there would not be buckets per se or a two-tier system because you're trying to reset something from the beginning. But clearly there are a number of councils across the country who are subject to some kind of DLUC intervention or commissioners being in there because of issues that are either in the press or well known. And there is discussions going on about whether councils in that position and the commissioners who are in do require an element of assurance with a financial aspect to it. And that may not be the case for any of them, because they may well be a governance issue that led to why the commissioners are in there, and that's for DLUC to understand. So there is no bucket, but clearly understanding whether there would be councils where an audit lens could be applied would be a key question that we would ask, and we would be keen to understand what the answer would be equally. So I can't answer your question to the limit, but that is where we are.
Thank you for the answer, as it can be. Any further questions on this agenda item, councillors? So one point that I need to raise on behalf of the council is that the annual governance statement 21-22 was signed off internally on the 26th of April this year. Nothing has changed in respect to that document since that date. And the council would request that rather than having to re-validate, re-sign, reprocess the document to the current date, that we don't do that. But council, am I got that right? Karen, can you just correct me if need to be? Thank you.
We have had the annual governance statement re-signed today. We just need to confirm to CGC that it is identical to the one which was approved back in the 26th of April. But it has been re-signed at the auditor's request.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. So don't worry about that. Thank you for the clarification. So if there are no further questions and comments, then we move to the vote. So the committee is invited to receive the audit results report, which you already have received. B, to approve the letter of representation, which is Annex B, and to authorise the Director of Finance and Corporate Resources as a Section 151 officer to sign it on behalf of the Council, and C, to give delegated powers to the Chair of the Committee and Director of Finance and Corporate Resources as Section 151 officer to authorise and sign the audited Statement of Accounts Annex C on behalf of the Council, subject to the auditors confirming an unqualified opinion on the Statement of Accounts 2021-22. Can I see all those in favour, please? That's also unanimous. Yeah. That's also unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Moving on then to item 9, which is the internal audit progress report. Deborah, we have your item next on the agenda. Could you please present this report to members? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So you probably remember that I normally give you the annual report, and you also have an interim one that's some way between the middle and the sort of third quarter, I should say, really, for that. What I've tried to do instead of having that and the implementation of audit actions report that you receive every meeting, I've tried to praise it, I suppose, down into one update report. So I'm happy to take sort of comments from you as to whether or not you prefer this or whether you want to revert back to the other way of doing it. You wouldn't normally have the interim report by this stage because it's too soon in the year. We haven't yet reached the midpoint and we haven't been, well, anywhere near fully resourced either. So there wouldn't be much to report on. So what you've got now is a quarterly report, and the presentation of this is likely to be every quarter if this is what you want. So I'm happy to take comments on it. If we go through it briefly, it's detailing the resources and the team update. So I'm happy to say that as of the middle of September, we're now much better resourced than we were last time we met. We've taken on a permanent person that was previously an interim, and we've also got a new starter who is an apprentice who is now just about signed up to do the apprenticeship scheme for the IIA and become fully qualified. So that'll leave all of us qualified, apart from Claire, who is still on maternity leave, and her return is not due until next year. So that's good news. At least we've got that in place. The next thing I've included in there is the progress against the audit plan. I think we've commented before that the plan is likely to be revised as and when the risk register is amended by services, and that's still my intention to do that. Picking up on the point about the exception reporting, I'd like to work with the risk officer so that any risks that are changed are notified through, or I can pick that up from the system, and then that will feed into the audit plan. Anything that becomes high risk should be maybe fed in and something else dropped off. This will be the place that will be notified to you. It hasn't happened yet. Talking about progress, and again, reiterate that we haven't had a fully resourced team anywhere near. So we've done risk management, business continuity plan, people capacity, disabled facilities grants, and code of financial management is just underwaiting my review and sign off at the moment. So what I've included in there is, I think committee asked for a sort of high level summary of them. So you've got the audit opinion for each of those, and then the high level summary findings, the sort of headline points. What I would say is that committee is quite entitled to ask for the full report for any of those, and we had the discussion last week at our informal meeting, and I think it was decided that I would share those with you on a quarterly or ad hoc basis. I can't remember now. I think it was quarterly. So it kind of makes sense that I provide you with those probably just before the next progress report, so you have the full flavour of the report, I guess. Significant issues, so that's anything that perhaps committee needs to focus in on that comes out of the audit reports. Again, they're two quite high level ones here, risk management and business continuity plan, but that won't necessarily always be the case. The next section is tracking of audit actions. So this will replace your usual implementation of audit actions report that I normally present to you. I've taken the statistics out of it, but I have left the table of overdue audit actions. And taking your point, Councillor Gray, it does have a cumulative miss on it still with the months late, which I agree we should be reporting on that. It gives you a much better feel for where we stand on these things. Again, it's exactly the same information that's normally presented to you. The only thing I would say is that the updates that I do ask services to give to you are a little bit lacking this time. As you can see, most of the dates are still June, so disappointingly, it's not a good update for you to see that they've made progress or not. I can't comment either way because I don't know any more than they've provided. There's still, I think there's 26 of those actions going forward, so it seems to consistently hang around 26 overdue actions. I know last week somebody mentioned about reporting on all of the actions outstanding, all of the open ones, to give you a feel for what is there. Again, I'm open to committee's viewpoints on those if they want those included. I feel it might make the report very large for you to have those open ones. I'm happy to share them at any point if you want them, but I'd like to think that your focus probably should be on those overdue ones, really. So I'm leading you that way. Point 5 is a governance update. So these are just brief summaries, as it were, of just areas of governance at HDC that you might want to be informed about. And just rolling on to the assurance opinions, just to tell you what they are, just to remind you. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Deborah. Do councillors have questions on this agenda item? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. On the overdue actions, we've heard tonight that some assurances from ICT, for instance, that that training is put in place to make sure that that staff members are aware of how to operate their computer systems, etc., and not to leave pieces of paper around, etc. And yet, one of our outstanding audit actions is about training in particular. So how can we have assurances that those things are being trained if the training is outstanding? See what I mean?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it probably relates to a different type of training, but certainly mandatory training is in place. We have a dedicated piece of software that when people log onto it, they can see what training elements they're expected to do. I think there's still quite a lot of work to make that a robust system, if I'm honest. It's something that I've picked up several times before in the information governance meetings. And it's a sort of personal bugbear of mine that if we don't do the mandatory training or we don't follow up on it, we don't exception report on it, then we're really not protecting ourselves. We're not assuring ourselves that people have got that knowledge. And if something were to go wrong, we don't have a defense to fall back on either. So I see it as really important. But I take the point, it is an area of governance improvement that we do need to do.
Thank you, Deborah. Councillor Gray?
Yeah, it won't surprise you that I've got a question, a couple of questions. Thank you very much for this, very useful. And I guess I've a question in terms of the overdue audit actions there. Thank you very much for putting the cumulative number of months that they are late, because I think that's revealing, shall we say. So let's take the one at the top of the list there. I'm really surprised at how the land charges team are 26 months overdue in written procedures should be in place to calculate the costs and calculation process for land charges. I mean, it seems to be quite central to the to that particular part of the organisation. I mean, you don't need to sort of go into the gory details, but I'm kind of looking at this end of the table here and thinking, you know, there's work to be done here to just get on top of what seems to me, you know, boring jobs, but they need to be done. The one that did stand out for me, given the earlier item that we talked about, it is the item about IT inventory of IT assets, which is 1621. So great, we've got a new procedure to ensure there are no gaps in numbers being followed with the new procedure. But what we haven't done for 13 months is to explain the reasons why there are gaps in our IT inventory. How do we know we haven't lost data? So I don't know how we had an assurance earlier that we've only lost one item of data electronically when we've got an IT inventory where we don't know where everything is. So it's things like this that sort of strike me that there's a little bit of work to do. And I'm not looking at you, Deborah, because you're simply shining a light on what goes on around the authority. But I'm looking more to Michelle. Welcome aboard, on some of these items to really get topside of them, because it just feels like we're a little bit kind of complacent in one or two areas. And I know that's easy for me to sit here and say that. And I know that everyone's under a lot of challenge and a lot of stretch, but it's our job here to hold you to account around issues of risk these are the risks that you have brought to us, saying we've got to, there are issues here that need to be looked at. So I'd quite like to, leave that hanging. Feel free to respond if you'd like to. My final point is, if somebody decides to take this off the list because they don't want to look at it anymore, how do we know it's gone off the list? How do we know that some of the land charges people just say don't want to deal with that, it's gone? Sorry, land charges people.
So they won't go off the list until such time as they've closed them. Of course, that doesn't mean, so that's the service manager or the action owner can close them on the system. They can say they've done them. It would then be my job to do a sort of desktop verification as to whether or not I believe them, whether or not they've uploaded something. I can do a superficial verification of that. Further to that, I can send somebody out to do a follow-up on it to do another testing verification. They can just be closed, but they should be picked up. Yes, that's the process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think slightly analogously to the risk picture, it would be nice to have be able to a more consumable picture of the audit backlog, and that's something else we could look at going forward. Any questions on this agenda item, councillors? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I take on board your comment, Councillor Gray. I'm just wondering if perhaps we could get somebody in from the land charges team to our next meeting to explain why there hasn't been any updates recently.
On the list.
I just want to, from memory, so it's not really land charges, it's really a finance issue. And I do believe that actually that they were taking guidance or looking at other councils to see how the model or which models they use to see if we could replicate it. Or I think that's my understanding of what's happened in the past. So I think it's more the financial calculation of the land charges model that's in question. Rather than anything Lisa's about to say.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yeah, I'm the service manager responsible for land charges. Thank you for my sins. Just to provide some clarification to that. So yes, there was an audit, and we had a rather complicated fee setting spreadsheet that was put together by one of the previous years back finance business partners. Massively complicated. Nobody could get to the bottom of to how the figures were arrived at. So we've been working on a much more simplified version, and there is still work undergoing. So, I mean, it's not to say that we are still going through our regular fee setting structure, but we're trying to simplify it massively in terms of, but there's some process we need to, you need to calculate the time taken to answer specific questions. So yeah, we're certainly working on it. We're using models from another authority as well, neighbouring authority, which have got a much simpler version. So yeah, it's Deborah's quite right. It isn't all down to land charges. We have been reliant on finance business partner as well, really. And to be fair, he's been doing an excellent job in supporting us on that. But it's a partnership. We're trying to get to the bottom of this anyway. So
Thank you, Lisa. Any other questions on this agenda item? Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you, Chair. First point is actually a compliment to the audit manager that you're encouraging and developing your staff to study for their professional qualifications, and I appreciate you have a limited headcount too. So well done on that. And secondly, I just wanted to pick up on an overdue action for the provision of debtor collection data. So this is stated to be on hold. And on that basis, I assume not moving forward. So should that not be coloured red? Thank you. Number is 1638. page 16. 1638, page 16.
I mean, to be honest, I'm looking for it still, but actually, I do wonder whether I shouldn't be replying to this, because actually, it's as Councillor Gray said, it's my job to focus, put the spotlight on it, but not to answer what's happening with these actions. It's up to management to implement these actions. So, action temporarily on hold pending further investigation. So that is the update that the service has put in. That's not my wording. So I haven't tampered at all with their wording. So it is directly from them to you. I don't actually know what that means. They've just decided they're not progressing the action until such time as they've looked at it further.
Yeah. What's happening, Karen?
I will admit to being completely puzzled. I have no idea why this action is on hold and what's being investigated. So I will take it away and feed back to the committee. I'm not aware of any work being put on hold. So.
Thank you, Karen. It's going to be appreciated, I think. Yep. Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Or no, we're ready to move on. Okay. Thank you, Councillors. Thank you, Deborah, for your report. Having reviewed that, we now move on to item 10, which is the Corporate Governance Committee Progress Report. And we have an update on the appointment of independent member, I think from Karen or Deborah or both. Thank you.
I think I was only going to mention that I've emailed out to you a couple of job descriptions that you might want to use for the independent member. So we do need to formalise that, whether you want to have a look through and pass comments through to myself or chair, and then we need to decide on one and move forward with advertising the post.
Thank you, Deborah. Yes, so councillors, if you could please just take a look and think about, what you think a good job description would look like for an independent member. That would be much appreciated. We are keen to progress this. There are some hurdles, not simple hurdles to overcome to get to where we want to be, to actually find suitable candidates. But we're, as I say, we're anxious to press on, and securing an appropriate job description is part of that. Obviously, there will be other independent members and other authorities that we might be able to sort of look at in terms of getting an idea of what good looks like. So, your assistance here would be appreciated. Thank you. There are 3 other items in this report. Do we have anything on the other 3 items? Disagree.
I was wondering whether, Mr. Chair, whether, given the conversation that we had earlier about potentially looking at the reporting elements of the risk management framework of the authority, whether or not that might be something that we could work collaboratively with the officers on and add as part of our work programme. Because I think there are lots of different ways of looking at risk management now. And I think it would be good for us to explore how it might be looked at and, as I say, work collaboratively with officers to look at how we'd like to express that. That's my first point. My second point is I notice that we still have shadow cabinet members to be confirmed, wider constitutional review. So again, I will obviously give the new chief executive grace around this issue, but it would be really nice the next time we come back to this panel and we meet again that we would actually have some idea about when we're actually going to look at the constitution with regard to shadow cabinet members, because it's still very much in limbo as to how we can engage with officers, what the position of my shadow cabinet is within the authority, and I think there's probably a wider constitutional review, and I think we would all agree, particularly those of you who went through a summer of fun over green bins, that it might be worth us actually cracking out a review of the Constitution and not kicking it into the long grass. So I've repeated my comment, Chair. I've posted my letter and wait to see what happens next time we come here.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Lisa, do you have anything to add on this particular?
So, yeah, sorry, through you, Chair. Yeah, no, certainly taking Councillor Gray's points. Michelle and I have regular catch-ups as well, and I think this is certainly on our agenda that we'll take forward. And say the progress report was certainly is correct in as much as obviously I was hanging on to pending the appointment of permanent chief executive. So I think it's a valid point to raise, and certainly I'll pick up going forward.
Thank you, Lisa. Much appreciated. Okay, if there are no other questions, comments on this last agenda item, sorry, Councillor Blackwell has one.
Now, I was just picking up on the final point, the update on the code of conduct and on the register of disclosure for pecuniary interests for Huntingdon. I think you're going to provide an update. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, so you shared that was the update. So we just clarified that, and Simon has checked that the vacancies were filled on the 3rd of August. So that is, I think there was a query about there were some vacancies, and you thought that there was a full complement of members. Yeah, so yeah, we have got that information that was confirmed as, yeah.
So just picking up on that, so can we progress further to ascertain if you've received the disclosures then as well, or do you not know at this stage for the 3 new members?
So without checking, certainly, I mean, all town and parish councils are required to send through their DPIs for us as a requirement for us to maintain the register. Without checking, I mean, certainly it will be hosted on our website, but certainly I could take that away and just double check again. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, if there are no further questions, that's the final item on the agenda this evening. So with that, the meeting is closed. Thank you for your attendance, councillors.